So thank you all very much for coming. We have a large panel today, and we have extended this to 2 hours so that we can hear from everyone and hear questions from all of you. We also have a large audience online. We have at least 188 people online. So we'll also be taking questions from them. But we are going to run it so that we hear the speakers first, and then we'll move to questions afterwards. I wanted to let you know that also if you're tweeting, it's at hashtag challenge gender norms, which is up here on the screen. Also, just to ask the speakers, speak into the microphone. I'm told you don't have to lean forward like this, but you shouldn't lean back like this. But that's so our online audience can actually hear. Okay. This event that we're hosting today is the culmination of 5 years' work in 4 countries exploring discriminatory social norms and adolescent girls, and the ways in which this gender discrimination limits girls' aspirations and capabilities and also causes harm. And we've sought to build knowledge in this area, which certainly when we started 5 years ago was a much neglected set of issues. And our aim is to share that knowledge to enhance policy and practice. We've conducted empirical research with partners, all of whom are here today and also sitting amongst you, in 4 countries: Ethiopia, Nepal, Uganda, and Viet Nam. All of our work is available online, but we also have a lot printed out today. And there are many copies outside the room. We'll also be putting up our online link to our Knowledge to Action resource series, which we're also launching today. We've undertaken systematic reviews of evidence of what works. We've produced this Knowledge to Action resource. Hard copies of that are in room E, and we will be demonstrating that during the networking lunch if people are interested to go in and see the online resource. It's been a hugely enriching experience for our whole team to work with our partners. They're all so professional and informed, and we've learnt a lot from them. And we'll be hearing from all of them shortly. But first I want to introduce our other 2 speakers. We're very aware that the work we've been doing is not a developing country problem. In fact, Anita, here, had a half-hour discussion at immigration when she came into the country, not on her visa status, but on trafficking girls to the UK. And they were very interested to hear from her about the work that we've been doing. So we're going to start by hearing from 2 speakers who work with UK-based communities. I'm not going to give long introductions to our speakers because you have a bio sheet and it takes a lot of time. And everyone has a very rich history. And we will be putting these online as well so that people can access the bio sheets online. But I want to introduce Zaza Johnson-El-Sheikh, who works especially in mediation, and she can explain her work in her talk. And also Diana Nami, who's dedicated her life to campaigning for universal human rights. And both of them will explain what they do as they speak. As I've told them many times, I'm going to be holding them to time. And so they have 15 minutes each. So, Zaza.
Thank you very much. Now, just to check, where do I point this towards?
I think you just click it.
But to where?
Anywhere.
Anywhere. Right. Okay, great. All right. So good morning, everybody. Really good to see such a large group of people here this morning. So as was just mentioned, I am a mediator. So I spend my life, and I do mean my life because it's in my home as well as outside of my home, resolving disputes. So those could be disputes that range between watching TV when you're supposed to be doing homework all the way through to life-threatening situations. So I come at this really with a background and training in hostage negotiation. So the honor-based violence that I'll be referring to, it's very much using that skill set. So a little bit about Converge. So it's a charity that strengthens fragile relationships. We're completely independent in that I have a commercial business that funds the charities. So the government has policies that say no mediation, but I'm not dependent on their funding, so I mediate. Yeah, we often find that there are women involved, women and girls involved in the story. We deal with fragile relationships, as I say, strengthening them. And you will find that women and girls are often admired. Throughout the course of history, women will have been admired for being nurturing, caring, supportive, strength, etc. But they can also be blamed. And again, that can happen on a personal basis and a professional basis. So I draw upon those experiences. So just very quickly, taking you through and skipping this slide because it's the scope of mediation. These are the organizations that I referred to, commercial and charitable. And looking at the resistance that one can encounter during the disputes. So disputes are referred to us by individuals. In the main, it will be individuals. And you will see that there are intergenerational disputes that can happen between siblings as well as between generations, where there'll be very high resistance. So this is where shame is at its highest. And for anybody who I'm able to speak with, probably one of the lines that I'll be saying is that I'm strongly averse to the term honor-based violence. I would strongly prefer for it to be shame-triggered violence because honor has got nothing to do with it. The objective is to retain honor. But what is causing the violence is the sense of shame. And that sense of shame is from the stress response. If we go back, this is my scarf, I won't say hat, as a doctor, previously a medical doctor, understanding the stress response to a situation where somebody has threatened, let's say, my survival because of my identity. My identity is that I will tell you what to do, and you will listen and you will carry out that instruction. Imagine that's my identity. I wish. Yeah. That's my identity. So I say that to you, and then if you don't comply, then that is a threat of my identity. And the way our brains are built in the amygdala is that a threat to my identity is synonymous with a threat to my survival. So it becomes a you or me. If you do not listen to what I'm doing and you threaten my survival, then one of us has to go. Yeah, that's the mindset. Yeah, and that comes down to the whole community. That who am I in my community? If I have a daughter who doesn't listen, who has sex before marriage, who has a relationship, where do I fit in then? I fit in nowhere. I'm nothing. All that I have invested in this child, in love, in money and time, is under threat. And furthermore, she is threatening the other children in the family as well. So we need to remove her. And I have heard the term delete. This person needs to be deleted. And they would like for it to be done by a click of a button almost. Yeah? So that's the sort of psychological and physiological background in that you lose rational thought. In that moment when you're under threat, you consider that this is a threat to your survival, rational thought is removed. And so you get to a point of no entry. Don't want to speak to anybody when I go cold calling because I've been asked to go to a home by a girl who's under threat of violence from shame. Often people will say to me, when the door is opened, often they will say, we don't have a daughter called that name. She doesn't exist. She's gone. We have no association with her. Often that's the case. And again, going back to the psychology of it, it's the unmet needs, the deep needs within that family of identity. Everybody needs an identity. one of the greatest challenges that we have in these times, whether you're a child on a playground or in this sense, this larger sense that's relevant to today, it's the need for belonging, that sense of belonging. So if you don't belong, there's a problem. That's where radicalization can come in, because people are searching for that sense of belonging. So they go looking for a gang, a group who has an identity, a strong identity, and that's what happens. So in the sense of going into a home where somebody has challenged the idea of honor in that family, so they've said actually honor what you believe is honor, which is to remain chaste. And believe me, when I teach young girls and I say to them, I teach them about Islam, and I say one of the principles of Islam is to remain chaste. And they say, oh, yes, miss, we want to remain chaste. Yeah, so chaste by boys rather than remaining in chastity. So, it's about this irredeemable deviation. It's considered to be irredeemable. There's nothing you can do about it. So it's a deviation from the social expectation, because if you are Sudanese, like I am originally, then you don't do this. But actually, girls in Sudan are doing this day and night, So it's about the social expectations in your micro community. So this social context that you believe is crucial to your identity, you've flown in the face of that. And it's very much, we will speak to nobody. We are so ashamed, we will speak to nobody about this. So as a mediator and using the skills of a hostage negotiator, I will go into these situations. And as I mentioned earlier, mediation is not supported by our legislation, our policies. But I've done the cases, and others in my group have done the cases, and we find that unless you attempt to transform this family's thinking, the law will not cut it. The law will not protect forevermore, because even if you are scared today from the law, from the impact of the law upon you, tomorrow, the day after that, getting other people to do your dirty work for you. So it's about transforming. And how I try to transform is by going in and saying, I understand, I totally understand that in this situation, you feel there is no tomorrow. Absolutely no tomorrow for you. You cannot exist if this situation is found out about, it becomes public knowledge within your community. Your survival is at threat. I totally understand that. And I'm not just saying it because we've had family circumstances as well, so I totally get that. So it's then not about saying, but you do realize this is wrong. Yeah, because again, that is not being authentic, not getting into their shoes with them, not empathizing. It's chastising. It's about totally understand that. So if you were to proceed with your plan to annihilate, to remove this young person, and I have had male clients as well, that was over sexuality as well as sexual activity before marriage. Then it becomes, what do you do about that? So it's talking to them, aligning with them, receiving what they have to say, and then challenging them based upon the context that they understand. So the influential factors would be religion, talking about the law as a backdrop, and culture. Because the yellow and the green, the culture is the main motivating factor. So the blue law is the cold factor, I consider. It's the main driver for people's activities in the communities that I work in, which are largely Muslim, but not exclusively Muslim, will be culture. And then religion is the backdrop. And there's often a confusion between culture and religion. So people will say, this is my Islamic duty to kill. This is my Islamic duty to protect. Let's look. You know, I'm Muslim too, but I haven't come across this. Please help me. So from a place of humility, not a place of, oh, no, you're absolutely wrong. That doesn't exist. It's okay, I see that you believe that. Let's look. You know, I've got my Quran here. I've got the Sunnah here. Let's have a look. Just point it out to me. It will help me, will help you. Yeah? And the culture, it's about, well, who is the driver for culture? Because whichever country you're talking about, communities here will still be grasping on very strongly because of the identity and the needing to hold on to that identity to a culture that has become extinct in their home countries. Nobody's abiding by that anymore, but they're driven by this and motivated by culture. So moving on swiftly, so we don't run out of time, what I actually do is the negotiating rights and security for these girls. So the rights may be the right to marry who they want to marry. And we also have very strong contacts with a number of marriage bureaus so that we are doing, as I will do for my own daughter if she accepts it, she's 20, reading law, that I will choose boyfriends for her. Yeah, so there's a new concept, you know, that it's suitors. That's what they're referred to as suitors. But they're actually, you know, a trio of people that I will introduce her to, and then it's for her to decide which of those. So I am introducing people that I have already vetted. Yeah? So that is a modern attempt at not an arranged marriage, but introducing the suitors. So the listening. Then in terms of these cases, engaging, so not saying, you know, well, you do know this is a crime, you know that you'll get X years for this, etc., etc. Exploring, empathizing, great. Empathizing with what it is that they're going through, their pain, their anguish, the analysis of it, and what can be done. Because people will say, but what else? How can I solve this situation? I'm in a real dilemma here that even if I personally think that my daughter should be allowed to live, come back to the family fold, etc., the community won't allow that. Yeah? So what can I do? And it's going through those different options because she's been seen in the rail station kissing somebody, you know, and it wasn't me that saw her, it was the community who came and told me. How will I look to the community if I do nothing about this? What am I saying? Am I allowing other people's daughters to do this? Yeah. So it's that analysis and that action and giving them options and challenging the norms, that because it's not for me to say that's not the norm. It's for us to have a discussion about, okay, so of the people that you said that nobody else has had this issue. Have you told anybody? No, I would never tell anybody. So how do you know that somebody else hasn't got the very same issue but just not told you? Yeah. So the reality testing and being non-judgmental. And you'll see, I hope, that there's an acronym there in the vertical that each case is to learn from. Each case. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, Zaza. That was resonated very much, I think, with a lot of the work we've been doing in many countries. I'd like now to pass to Diana, who's going to explain her work on similar issues.
Thank you so much. Good morning. I am honored really to be here today with all wonderful people in this room. And congratulations for wonderful research you have done. I hope it will be some opportunity to do it with the Middle East and North Africa too, of course, mainly Middle East. I am Diana Nami, the founder and executive director of Iranian and Kurdish Women's Rights Organization. We call it ICRO for short on it. Yes, you can see it. And I set up the organization in 2002 after my own interpreter was killed a few years before. Sorry, who was killed? My own interpreter. When I entered the UK, I couldn't speak English, so I have been provided an interpreter. She was killed, and they took her back. The husband took her back to Iraq. They killed her there because he suspected that she is flirting with one of her colleagues. And it was then when I heard the news, I talked to police through a friend that could speak English, and I informed the police about this case. When police told me it is your culture, and if we interfere, then you will call us racist. And also because the incident did happen in Iraq, then we cannot do anything as Iraqi's police duty, although she was a British citizen. So after that conversation I had with police, it was like a wake-up call for me that it's something strongly is going wrong. We have to make changes. First of all, to raise awareness about honor killing and honor-based violence, to make sure that professionals are understanding that, to make sure that there is services like for individual women like Sophia, my interpreter, to come and seek help. And for many other work, saving lives is on our table, against discrimination, for equal rights, because we, as a women from minority community, should be entitled for the same rights as a British women. And culture or religion is not a justification for killing, for us to prevent us to access the same law. So it was lots of things we had to challenge. I am glad to say that we come a long way after 13 years. We changed quite a lot. And when I started the organization, I was thinking, would there be anyone to listen to me when I am talking about this issue? And today I have to congratulate all of us that is part of the literature, part of the government law. And it's lots of attention, not only in the UK, around the world, against this issue. And we are part of the huge movement against violence against women, especially honor-based violence, and some people call it harmful practices. I started the organization from my own home. Then we have now 20 staff members, and we provide holistic advice and advocacy and support for women, mainly from Middle Eastern, Iranian, Kurdish, Afghan, Turkish, and Arab. We are now mentioning that Middle East, North Africa. Our focus is forced marriage, female genital mutilation, honor-based violence, and domestic violence, and other forms of violence. We provide our services in 7 different languages to women from this community. Our policy is that we never turn down any woman who seek help and support from us unless we make sure that she is safe. And our work is based on equality and human rights, so there is no any barrier for us to helping anyone. We provide counseling free in 4 languages: Kurdish, Farsi, Arabic, and English. We provide training to professionals from schools to police and any other organization. We do lots of campaigning to make changes in the law for good and in terms of human rights and equality in the UK. So that's what we are doing very briefly. Oh, thank you, sorry. Yeah. But what is important for us, from the very first day, we decided we have to make changes within our community that practicing honor-based violence, and within the country, the law, how we can make these changes. We had quite long discussions about honor-based violence. Shall we call it honor or not? You mentioned that you call it shame trigger. It was long discussions. Still, it is an issue about that for many professionals. I have to say that there is no honor in honor killing, but we keep calling it honor because we want to target exactly the same things that community are known and women know that. So they know when we are saying we have to end honor-based violence or honor killing within everyone knows what we are talking about. So we don't change the name, really, because we want to target exactly that. As part of that, it's shame, which I agree with you. We want to acknowledge that the problem is there, and acknowledgement is very important because many people within our community try to deny that or keep us silent. When we start up the organization, We have received death threats. We have received lots of abusive words. People from community even attempt to beat me up in the court, family of victims. And many, not only family of victims, many of women organizations, well-known women organizations, both from my own community and in the UK, they try to tell us that we have to keep silence. We have to keep it within our community. It's part of our, if it's shameful to talk about that openly. And many people say racists will get opportunity to use it against our community. What they missed, in my opinion, was the empowerment of women, the right of women, the rights to live, very simple, basic things. And if it's so shameful to not talk about that openly, why we allowed that happen within our community? So we had to challenge all those things. We need to admit that this is a problem. And from this time that people try to prevent us now, I am saying that the community has changed quite a lot. People, last year we had 2,500 calls, over that actually, from communities, from individual women seeking help, or from professionals who sought advice for their own clients. We had 800 women face-to-face, we helped them. And the majority of cases, the issue of honor-based violence was involved. But we have, of course, each case is different. We had very high-risk cases, and we had cases that the risk was not so immediate. So each case is different from the other, how to help them. We need to ensure that the safeguarding is fit, okay, for safeguarding, for the purpose. Our main aim is safeguarding women and children. So culture, family getting upset, those are things that kind of preventing us really to do the work. There is no any justification for this crime. Safeguarding children and vulnerable adults is part of the policy. So it doesn't make any difference if this girl who is at risk of female genital mutilation in the same school, but because she is from another country, we have to respect that culture, or the family will be upset. There is no any justification. Safeguarding should be entitled for every single person and children in this country, including my children, your children. 5 minutes, thank you. And shifting powers from perpetrators to victim. This is very important because what we want to say that we need to change the mindset of the community. I will think that many times we are thinking about saving these women here and there. We just set up our refuge. From May, it's full. We have got a long queue, 8-bed from the beginning. So we save those women. But unless we change the mindset of the community, we cannot reduce this problem. And the great work we need to do is with the community. And by doing so, we need to identify, let me say that, not all people within the community are for honor killing or for forced marriage or FGM. Not all of them practicing that. Actually, the minority are practicing that. This minority had no mercy for their own child. They will have no mercy for us. And they will put pressure on the rest of the community who are against that. There are so many people who think the same way that we are thinking. We need to bring them together. We need to give them power. We need to make them the champion within the community to make changes. And this is the way that has been very successful. To empower victims, to empowering women, to empowering the group within the community who can stand up for their rights, for human rights, for protecting rights of women and children. We need to give power to them. And ensuring that the girls are aware of their rights, because from very young age they will be aware that they will be at risk of forced marriage, they can be at risk of honor-based violence, at risk of female genital mutilation. So when they are aware of the problem, why should not them to be aware of their rights and the help available in the UK? And because of that, we raise a campaign. It's called, I didn't go through my slides, sorry, because of the time, but we raise a campaign called Rights, Now Your Rights, and it's targeting education system, and we invite them to come and for violence against women, different form of them, to be part of the safeguarding policy, to be part of the safeguarding education, all teachers to be trained to identify the sign and how to help their children. Just to say that we started from 2 years ago to work with school. At the beginning, they try to prevent us even to talk to teachers. From 2 years ago, little by little, some schools started to invite us actually to talk to people. We give training to teachers. Later on, they invited us. We started to work with secondary school. And last week, we had the first training for primary school. Okay. We were surprised by the support that we received from children themselves, from their family, and from teachers. We received tens of cards from school children. They make cards and thank you for us. And the parents, during the 2 years work with them, one of the school, for 8th of March this year, they gathered more than 50 families in the school. They invited ICRO to be there, and they made a huge cake, quite big, Happy International Day, and they waited for us to go and cut it with them. So the school is great part for working with the community. And we must not be, the fear must not be there for us to work for the rights and safeguarding. There is no any way. Just quickly show one or two cases. You can have this presentation. I appreciate. You can send it to them. Yes. This is one of the case, Heshu Yunus. When first, in 2002, she was killed by her father because she had a boyfriend. Her father stabbed her 17 times and slit her throat. It happened in Acton, not far away, in London. She was only 16. Okay. At that time, police didn't know that is an honor killing. Of course, we helped police to understand that. From this case, it was the first case in the UK that publicly has been acknowledged as an honor killing. But even the justice for Heshu, we raised a campaign called Remember Heshu. The justice for Heshu was not done properly because judge says in the verdict day, although the father pleaded guilty, but we will consider his culture to the tariff. And they reduce his sentence to 14 years. But changes even within justice system happen. In Banos' case, later on, Banos was 5 times she went to police. This is a picture of an interview when she was giving information to police about her own family that planned to kill her. At that time, they didn't believe her or didn't take the case seriously. Her own family, they gang raped her and they killed her. They put her body in that suitcase, taking her from Mitcham in London to Birmingham. On the basis of information that Banos gave to police, they done an excellent investigation. They found her body after 3 months, 4 months. But it was like a wake-up call for police that for all professionals, those cases are real. We have to take them seriously. And, of course, this is the campaign I was talking about. You can go to the website, Right to Know campaign, and support our campaign. It is very successful so far. We have lots of young people and schools contacting us for joining the campaign. The last slide is, our information. Feel free to contact us anytime that you need help and support for your case. Just very briefly, if you allow me 1 second to say that I appreciate, because this is important to mention, not against you, but our approach. We are very much against mediation for HBV cases and forced marriage cases. Of course, community can find different way to sort out this problem, and I understand your approach because from your point of view, you want to sort out this problem. But because monitoring and follow-up cannot be there, this is a very risky, and our organization actually suggested, and it was part of our campaign, to not mediate. During the last 13 years of ICRO, only twice we mediated. One was very successful because we did really thorough work with the family, and we knew that it's changeable. But the second time it was not successful. So it's very dangerous. And I just would, from bottom of my heart, telling you are doing a very risky work. So
I know.
yeah,
I
please
know.
be very conscious. And we are here anyway.
Yes,
We
yes.
can talk about that.
Yeah.
So thank you very much. Thank you.
Diana, thank you very much. Some really interesting issues coming out as to how you tackle these problems. Now, Diana, thank you very much for coming, because I know that she's actually moving her office today, which is very poor timing for all of us, and I think may have to leave shortly. I can take a couple of questions for her immediately. We're not actually doing questions till after we've heard from all speakers, but if there are any pressing questions, do ask now, and otherwise we'll move to the other speakers. We will have an opportunity, of course, to pass on questions to Diana, and we'll be putting up an account of the event, a Storify, within a week of this event, and also the actual broadcast will be online, so there'll be lots of opportunities to send in questions later. I'm very aware that in my excitement to introduce everyone, I didn't introduce myself. And I'm Caroline Harper. I'm the head of the Social Development Programme here at ODI, and with colleagues have been running this programme of work. So now we're going to move on to our country panel. Okay, thank you, Diana,
I am
for coming.
sorry that I leave you, but yeah.
Okay.
Thank you so much, and have a very nice day.
Okay. So we've heard about some actually very alarming practices in the UK, and the courageous and undoubtedly courageous work of our two speakers, and very inspirational work. They've also referred very much to changing the mindset. Both speakers talked about changing the mindset of the community. And that is actually what our researchers have been investigating in the 4 countries. Similar harm that we've heard about today is commonplace in all the countries where we worked, and it takes different forms, but it is certainly present. And our researchers have been looking at the underlying values and ideologies, the rules and expectations of behaviour, and the actual practices which fundamentally disempower girls. And this is along a wide set of capabilities. So we've been focusing in the last 2 years on early marriage and education, but we've also been looking at wider contexts around their economic empowerment, around their voice, and around their actual empowerment to speak out and to be able to stand up for themselves, alongside the community issues which enable them to do that. And of course, also being very conscious of the vertical linkages to legal systems and to economic systems and the context in which they are living. So the research is looking also at some of the efforts that are underway to attempt to empower girls and challenge patriarchy and discrimination in these contexts. So we're going to move now to a panel discussion, which will be about 20 minutes. Nicola Jones will be comparing the panel discussion with some questions and answers. So I'll hand over to Nicola now.
Great. Thanks very much, Caroline. So as Caroline has highlighted, we've just heard from our first 2 speakers some of the really devastating consequences of gender norms. And clearly those stories are at quite a severe end of the spectrum. What we tried to do in our DFID-funded research on adolescent girls and social norm change was to really explore some of the more structural dimensions of social norms and the ways in which they're permeating the lives of myriad girls and limiting their futures. That being said, I think it's really important to highlight that the research sites that we selected in the 4 countries, Ethiopia, Nepal, Uganda and Viet Nam, were regions that have some of the most vulnerable and hardest to reach girls. So just to give you one example, in Vietnam, the country, as most of you will know, is renowned for its really rapid development and very impressive poverty reduction record. But our research focused on work in the northern highlands among ethnic minorities who are very highly marginalized. So one of the key things that's come out from our cross-country work is that while globally statistics from sources such as the demographic and health surveys are showing that the average age of marriage is going up globally, actually what we found within our countries is that there's really a great deal of variation, both in rates and indeed even in direction of changes. So when we look cross-generationally, we actually found that some of the daughters in our sample were getting married earlier than that of their mothers. And the other key thing that really shone out when we look across the 4 countries was that the type of marriage is also changing really rapidly. So in particular, in all the 4 countries, there's been quite a shift away from arranged marriages and increasingly towards marriages that are based on adolescent choice, or in the case of Uganda, then towards cohabitation without marriage. But I think what's key to emphasize that these choices are often in environments where girls have very limited access to information about the implications of getting married at an early age, and also in environments where they have very limited alternatives outside of marriage for girls. Another key thing that we think is important to sort of set the scene is to also highlight the ways in which marriage traditions are starting to be used in new ways. So, for example, in the case of the Vietnamese Hmong community, in the past, marriage by abduction was historically closer to what we might think of as elopement. But today, it's increasingly being used by some adolescent males to secure girls they see and like at the marketplace for their brides. So among the girls that we interviewed, the youngest ones were those who had been abducted or kidnapped for marriage. And then another striking finding, which I think resonates very much with what Zaza and Diana were talking about previously, was how isolated many adolescent girls are within their communities, and particularly those that face strict mobility restrictions, such as in Nepal. So many girls, they don't have access to peer groups, have very limited friend circles, and especially those who've dropped out of school and married at an early age. So given this broader backdrop, what our research tried to do in the final year of our field work was to focus in on communication-type interventions, which were aimed at breaking down girls' isolation and promoting their broader self-confidence and empowerment, whether that be through girls' clubs, through peer-to-peer monitoring, or through community radio. So we drew on the findings from a systematic review of global evidence that our colleagues Rachel and Alla, who are here today, can tell you more about, on different types of interventions, which really highlighted that communications approaches have emerged as especially promising avenues of action. So given this, my first question for our panelists is, what are the examples of good practice from your research whereby program interventions have effectively tackled entrenched gender norms? So I'd like to start with Van Ang and the Vietnamese findings.
As Nicholas said, in Vietnam, we work with the Hmong community. It is one of the poorest ethnic group in the country. They also have the lowest average marriage age and the biggest gender gap in primary education. And in our project, we found that Girls Club has been very transformative for Hmong girls. It has given them, it provided them confidence to share their concerns, but also to negotiate the gendered division of labor in household. As by social norms, girls are the ones to help in housework, but not boys. They are now much more active and clearer about their own future. They know what level of education to go, where to go, and when to get married. Most of them say they want to postpone marriage.
Okay, so some very inspiring shifts in the Vietnamese case. And what about in Ethiopia, Bekele? Can you tell us about, amongst the programs that you reviewed, what some of the ingredients for success were?
Yes, yeah. In Ethiopia, the government as well as civil society organizations and NGOs, international and national, are working on adolescent issues. For example, Hiwot Ethiopia has designed a program for peer-to-peer. Each segment is peer-to-peer mentoring and support. What they are looking at is these segments, include like the younger adolescents, the older adolescents, teen couples, adults, and older people. And so they are looking at the different, concerns and vantage points in which, these groups can tackle early marriage and other related issues like, teenage pregnancy, rape, abduction, things like that. Yeah.
Okay, great. So a really nice example of a very tailored approach that's not just taking a cookie cutter approach to change. And so, Anita, I know that in the case of Nepal, you've also found some successful examples, but that are not focusing only on communication initiatives, but that are having a more multi-pronged approach. Can you tell us about those?
Thanks, Nicola. Yes, this was a government-funded program run by the Ministry of Women. And the most interesting part of the program was that it used both economic and non-economic empowerment strategies. So what it did was it brought the girls together, girls who had dropped out of school, and then it gave them training on life skills, such as what counts as gender-based violence, what are the local redress mechanisms that are available. But it also gave them livelihood trainings, for example, sewing trainings, and then it gave them seed money to start some small entrepreneurship. So the girls were starting a small business, earning their own, and using that money to continue their education or, to take further trainings. So this program was addressing gender norms by, by keeping girls in school, by increasing their exposure, giving them mobility options, and also their career aspirations. And by bringing them together in a group, it was, giving them an agency and a voice. And what was interesting about the program was the way the program was run. It was at first originally a UNFPA program, but the government took it over and scaled it up, and then it very smartly used its decentralized structure and resources so that the program becomes cost-effective and self-sustainable. So that was very interesting about the program.
Great. And Grace, I know that you've also uncovered some similar types of very innovative programs that are trying to tackle the complexity of gender norms in Uganda.
Yeah, thank you, Nicola. In Uganda, we investigated a number of programs in rural Uganda, and mainly areas with about 40% of the population poor. And these programs were targeting norms related to child marriage and teenage pregnancy. The key success areas, we found that communications, especially various radios, community dialogues, school clubs, were very, very instrumental, targeting various stakeholders, the girls, the boys, but also their parents and the community in general. We found that the communication alone is not enough, but they did combine with skills development and skills training and empowerment, agency building for the girls and boys, but also improving their livelihoods, given that the communities are extremely very poor. They also had an additional vocational training, especially for the child mothers, the girls who had dropped out of school. They gave them skills of tailoring, craft making, that really helped them, start up, and many of them also returned back to school. So, in a sense, we think that what made a difference was the combination of knowledge and attitude change, but also with practical and livelihood skills, made a difference in changing the norms.
Okay, so some really nice examples of good news stories, and really, I think, highlighting that entrenched gender norms can be overcome with different types of action. But I think at the same time also our research really highlighted that there are many remaining challenges. So Vanang, in terms of some of the key pitfalls that the programs that you looked at encountered in Vietnam, can you highlight a couple of those?
Yes. We found that programs are not adequately involving boys. While in Hmong community, boys are the main drivers of child marriage. They initiate a relationship. They make decision on marriage, including whether or not to conduct a bride abduction. And they are not yet involved in the awareness raising activity relating to a child marriage or the relationship, how to build and how to express the strength and how they should respect each other in a relationship. Also, parents are not adequately involving too in a multi-pronged program. We assess parents are provided with the messages on clean water and sanitation, but not yet on child right to education and to protect from child marriage. They are not guided clearly about how to do if their boy bring underage bride home and what should happen after that. So I think it is still a lot of things to be done.
Oh, definitely. And Grace, if you were giving messages to program designers and policymakers about what not to do if they're trying to tackle discriminatory gender norms, what would your recommendations be?
I think our recommendation draws from the fact that most of these successful programs have a short period of operation. So the question of sustainability becomes a major one. And given that we know that changing social norms will take a much longer time, and it is a slow process, and the projects are short, 3-4 years, I would recommend full integration of these projects and programs in the local system, in the local development government programs, and strengthen the linkages and structures between the two, the civil society, the development partners, and government structures. But I think we also have to make a clear linkage, vertical linkage, right from the national government in terms of also policy and programming, linking the national development programs with the local government, and so that they can be able to support programs of this kind that we have observed that make a difference in girls' lives.
Great, thanks, Grace. Bekele, I know in Ethiopia that the government has really been trying to bridge some of these gaps between NGOs and government structures, and they've set up something called a Women's Development Army. So I wonder if you can tell people just a little bit about that, but also some of the risks associated with that model.
Okay, the government has developed a new structure at the grassroots level. We have what we call qabales. I think they are called wards, or within a district you could have like 20 or 30 qabales, and then within that development committee, there are different groups for each sector, and for the health and women affairs, we have what we call development army, and these are women, and these women are instrumental, to reach, the women, individual women in all the villages, because all women are organized in what you call into 1 to 5 group. So the one person, the leader, which is the one of the person from the development army, have this meeting, different meetings with women. At the same time, the different sectors go together to meet the people, and so they discuss about agriculture, about water, education, and health. But the problem is, the development army gets the least time to talk to the people. So there are two problems. One is the meeting fatigue. People are just tired of meetings, and the second one, the development army have little time to to explain, to talk, and to the people.
And so given that these messages are being diluted around harmful traditional practices and child marriage, I mean, did you come across in the research examples of how those messages could be better amplified?
There are other initiatives, like, for example, a radio program. This radio program is targeting adolescent girls. But the problem is, this radio program is not effective where girls have no time to listen and reflect on the message. Whereas on the other, in the other side, in our research site, we have discovered that there are discussion groups where different girls come and discuss the message they have got, and reflect and internalize the message. So there are these kind of problems, but also different methods of reaching the people.
Okay, thanks, Bakili. And Anita, do you want to share some of the messages around what not to do that you've learned from the research in Nepal?
Well, one of the challenges we saw was around targeting. So girls who are in need were generally left out. What we observed was that once a girl gets a training, she kind of becomes better skilled at articulating her needs, and then she is also in a better position to approach the program again and again. So she is selected again and again, and the other people are left out.
And so what do you think could be done moving forward to ensure better targeting of the girls who are most in need?
I think these examples underscore the need to, understand or have a deep knowledge on the local context. So, for example, the programs were targeting dropout girls, but in some villages, girls were not dropping out of education. So the programs could have targeted girls who are, who are in danger of being married early, for example. So what the program could have done in context of Nepal was, it could have used its local systems. For example, we have very active mother groups and civil society forums in all the villages. So the programs could have made use of these kind of systems to, to design criteria for targeting and also for selection of the participants.
Okay, thanks very much, Anita. So I think this captures really just a very small snapshot of some of the findings. There's a lot more detail in the reports and the briefings that are outside. And I think now we're going to open up for broader discussion and more questions.
Yes. Well, thank you very much. And a huge thank you to all the speakers who have kept brilliantly to time. So it's a wonderful example of how to keep to time. And a very interesting discussion, which I think we'll now start to move to the discussion section of our program this morning. We've got two discussants to kick that off, both from more of the donor international institution perspective. So I'm going to ask for a little changeover now, mainly because we just don't have enough seats up here. So we're going to ask our three panelists here to move and be replaced by our two discussants. Yes, Grace, sit there for them. Okay, so now I'm going to pass to Sarah Cook. Sarah's director of UNICEF's Innocenti Research Centre in Florence, and obviously UNICEF does a large amount of work on adolescent girls. And so I want to just pass to her to hear initial comments for about 4 or 5 minutes, whatever you want, and then we'll move on to Rachel.
Okay, well, thank you. I mean, I should first add the caveat that I've been in UNICEF for 3 months, so I'm not, qualified to sort of really speak, but I can talk about some of the research. But let me first thank you for the invitation to be here, and really congratulations to, I think, all of the ODI and the partners and participants for really, I think, ahead of the curve, identifying these kinds of issues and putting them, I think, doing very good research and putting them creating a beginning of an evidence base that we can really start building on as the issues this range of issues have got greater attention. I think also congratulations on this panel, because I think one of the things that comes out of having, particularly also the UK perspectives and the issues within this context, and in the context obviously where we're talking about a more universal so-called sustainable development agenda, the SDGs, where we can just see the challenges universally on many of these issues, and they don't go away with development. They change their shape. There are processes of social change that we're always going to be grappling with, that are going to take their forms. If we target one issue, child marriage, it'll arise the problems in different kinds of ways and have other effects that are unexpected. So I think that this has been a very useful discussion from that point of view. I think also the approach and this kind of attempt to try and get at some of the structural drivers and determinants. I think there's a lot more we need to do here, but I think this is a really helpful sort of starting point. I think it's a counterpoint to a lot of the research which is going on at the moment on some of these issues, which are really aiming to answer the question, which you also try and address, of what works. You also look a little bit more and have raised some of the issues of what doesn't work, and often we neglect the lessons of what doesn't work at our cost, because then we keep reproducing the interventions that don't work. But I think, not focusing so much on, as far as I can see from what I've heard and the little I've read, on the particular programs, the focus on some of these broader issues rather than on evaluating and the more sort of, if you like, rigorous evaluation methodologies of interventions, which tend to be so unidimensional. One intervention, one outcome, do we see the connections? And we're missing the point in most of those studies. They may be very useful in evaluating a particular intervention. They may tell us some things, but often they don't tell us what really matters. And I got the sense from the limited what we heard here that you're beginning to get that nuanced. When you do intervene on one thing, things change, and then you have to follow up in different directions and keep being responsive. Last night I was at a launch, and I don't know if colleagues are here, the House of Lords, of ICRW's very interesting and very rigorous evaluative project on looking at child marriage in Haryana, which is a really interesting study and worth looking at. And I think they're very honest about the limitations of what you can see from this kind of intervention study. And I think we're all in that sense. There's been a lot of support for research that is about the rational individual. We can nudge their choices, we can change their behaviors. And I think here we're trying to really grapple with how processes of social change happen. We have much less good research going on, I think, in the development community at the moment on these social change processes. And I think we have less developed methodologies to really try and understand how do these factors interact. I mean, you've talked about the relationship between the material, livelihood, interventions, the empowerment, the information, the education, interactions between I was glad that boys were raised, families have been raised, the justice system, the police system, all of these institutions, which often we neglect when we're looking at those sort of much more narrow. We're holding all that constant and forgetting about it, but that's what's changing and that's what's influencing these changes in social norms. And so, I think this is really a basis for a lot more work in this area. I think a couple of the points where I'm sure you've got a lot more to say, and I would love to hear more, is really then from collectively across these different programs, can we start saying something about where critical entry points or critical moments, critical constraints that we can address? And, rather than saying we need to end child marriage or we need that, but where do families, households, education really need support, and or which other institutions, the police, the judiciary, where do we start thinking about, where do we need more knowledge, where are the research gaps, and where can we best intervene? And I think, a key message from a lot of this research, which is coming out and being able to reflect on when we can look a bit more comparatively cross-country, etc., is to understand the intersections and the intersectoral work. How do education, health, social protection, cash transfer, etc., systems work together in synergy? Where do we support them? At the moment, we still tend to do our work and our programs in these sectors, and we really have to get both the research base, the evidence base, the methodologies for understanding the interactions a lot stronger. I think that would be an important area for where to take some of this work forward, and whether it's sort of looking from a social policy perspective, that these are all parts, I think in our countries, in Western Europe, a lot of the social change around gender and women's roles, changing ages of marriage, happened in the context of developing a welfare state system, expanding education systems, expanding childcare systems, which created jobs for women, which gave them new sort of economic opportunities. So there's all sorts of ways in which this has happened historically in low-income European countries, or in East Asian countries in different ways. And I think we need to learn also from those kinds of experiences. A final maybe point, which is really a question, because Nicola, you mentioned that, and we know this from the overall evidence, that age of marriage has been rising generally. It's very interesting to hear these wider variations, or the emergence of perhaps more problematic or different forms of problematic practices in some areas. And in a sense, the question then becomes, where are these social norms, or where is it that the social norm has changed? So it's those practices of people who are almost behaving outside the social norm, and then that creates more problematic, more below the radar, almost more hidden forms of and so at the moment we're talking about it all as social norms, gender norms, harmful norms, but actually if we're seeing those, they're changing as social in terms of widely accepted norms. But then are we actually seeing the sort of more problematic practices becoming less the norm, but therefore more hidden and more difficult to address? And it just occurred to me as you were talking about that, and the link there would also be that it seems from what you were saying that it would also often be the most vulnerable girls, the poorest, the most marginalized in other ways. So in a sense, you're exacerbating these inequalities and vulnerabilities of certain sectors of the population. So that's a question just to throw out. But thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm now going to pass to Rachel Yates. She's a Senior Social Development Advisor with DFID, and she's the policy lead on child marriage. About 5 to 7 minutes, so that we can then open up to the audience.
Great. Well, like Sarah, very gratefully invited me to the event today, and I think it's been a really rich panel discussion with some great examples from the UK and internationally. And many of you may be aware that within the sort of UK international development area and within DFID, the work on social norms has gained a lot of traction over the last sort of 2-3 years, and I think a lot of that has actually been down to the work of ODI, who've really sort of helped put this on the agenda, both building up the evidence base, both really increasing understanding, not just amongst sort of official levels, but at a political level, that basically we're not going to achieve international development targets or make progress against the new SDGs unless we really look at some of these underlying structural drivers. And obviously with the new Sustainable Development Goals, we now have sort of tangible goals relating to social norms on child marriage and FGM. So that has actually put this agenda in quite a good place. I mean, the challenge now is how do we translate this sort of global commitment and really get things moving on the ground. And this is why research like this can really identify what some of those key interventions and measures are, but also some of the sort of complexities. So I think, from a DFID perspective, we're very pleased to have been associated with this work, and I think it really has yielded a lot of very interesting sort of policy content. And now the challenge is to translate some of these lessons into practice, into various programs. So, I mean, just reflecting on some of the stuff that's sort of come out across the presentations, And what's been interesting is that, despite the diversity of contexts, whether we're talking about the UK, Ethiopia or Vietnam, there are some sort of real similarities that we're starting to see in some of the sort of entrenched norms around notions of purity, notions of control, notions of shame that sort of bisect or sort of cut across the different country contexts. And the drivers of these may be different in different countries, but clearly around adolescence in particular, there are some things that are happening to girls which really can affect major life choices and affect their sort of voice, choice and control. And unless we really understand what these are and sort of look at ways of responding to them, then it's going to have major impact on girls' life choices, whether it's access to education or to livelihoods or issues around fertility, when to marry, how many children to have, and so on. So these are sort of issues that are absolutely sort of fundamental and are sort of key issues across many cultures. And coming out of the presentations, it's clear that there are different drivers in different contexts which may vary across sort of time and context. So around religion, around culture and around the law. And obviously in the UK we heard that sort of, that the sort of cultural underpinnings are often the strongest. I think that has implications as well when we're tackling social norms, how much you go into looking at the legislative system or how much you actually go and work at the sort of community level through mediation or through other means. And I think these are some of the issues that we're sort of grappling with development programmes. At what levels do you intervene, sort of legal, cultural, economic? And I guess it's not an either or, it's like really trying to think about what that sort of package of interventions is. Another sort of theme that seems to be coming out is also the importance of interventions that are sustainable and actually are linked to national systems, whether that's the Women's Development Army or whether it's Nepalese local village development committees. Because I think there is a real challenge in order to take interventions to scale, the need to really embed it within sort of systems that are sort of nationwide. And I think there was a very good example also from the UK about working with the education system and safeguarding. And I know that's been quite a challenge in some ways in working in that area. But of course, once you're able to get something into the curriculum or teacher training, the potential for going to scale is so much greater. So I think we have got a lot of opportunity to learn internationally in the UK what are those sort of systemic interventions. And I know there are people here who've been working on child protection systems, which is an area which is critical for working on issues of child marriage and FGM. And one of the things I'm very conscious about in programming on social norms is that we often take a very sort of siloized approach. There's a violence against women and girls program, a child marriage program, a FGM program, but ultimately it's the same systems who are responding to these things. And does this actually make things more difficult, challenging to implement if we're looking at it in a very sort of segmented way? So I think some of these systems issues, it would be good to maybe sort of reflect on a bit more. I think one of the other issues that has come up is about some of the interactions, and I think Sarah brought these issues out about really understanding how different sectors can combine to improve outcomes around adolescence and changing social norms, and the issue around sort of bundling interventions. And we heard some nice examples of where girls groups plus livelihoods interventions might be some of the critical things we want to scale up. And I think, again, one of the sort of trade-offs we often have to consider is the more you have in your bundle, the more difficult that is then to take it to scale, the more costly it is. And although we have some really good evidence that these bundled interventions work on a small scale, once you're trying to do them, across hundreds of thousands of girls and boys, they don't become affordable for the sort of national system. So therefore the challenge is sort of, what are those absolutely sort of critical elements that we can build on and so forth. And I think, again, looking at the sector perspective, thinking about interventions in education systems and social protection and so on, is thinking about what are those things that are operating at scale, which can be sort of tweaked to actually achieve some of these things. And I'm glad to say that ODI and ICRW are going to be trying to take forward some of these knotty questions about what works at scale on adolescent girls as part of a Global Girls Research Initiative, which is being funded by DFID. I think after months and months of not being able to say who has actually won the bid, it's nice to be able to sort of say it openly. I hope I am saying it at the right time. But I think there are some really good opportunities for longitudinal learning on what works, and really sort of taking some practical country examples on how to scale up. I think I probably had my time now, but just one final point I wanted to make. I really reinforce this issue about targeting. On some of these interventions, are we really reaching the most vulnerable girls? We often talk about adolescence as if all girls are homogenous, but we know that 10 to 14-year-olds are very different to 15 to 19-year-olds, and there's a real challenge sometimes in making sure that the girls' clubs, the economic interventions, are really getting to those girls who really are sometimes the most hidden and the most at risk. So I think these are challenges we need to think about collectively. So thanks very much.
Thank you. Great. Thank you very much, Sarah and Rachel. A very good start to the discussion with a lot of questions thrown out there. And I'm going to now open up the discussion to the floor. We're also taking questions online. I can see some have come through already. So I will be selecting from the questions that we get. I should also say that Grace Bekele Van An, you are actually still on the panel, and you're not off the hook. And there's actually a camera right here. So you are in the limelight as well. So please address your questions either broadly to the panel, and then I can select people to answer, or to specific individuals if you've got a specific question. I would ask that when you're asking a question, if you could please keep it succinct, so that we can sort of share around a bit more. And indeed, when you're answering a question, but I think our panel are all very experienced. So I'll open it up to questions now.